Right, so that was the stock sound test for the Iqunix EZ63. We are going to modify it now to make it sound a little bit better. We're going to start by taking it apart, which involves removing the 4 screws on the sides. Once we've unplugged the PCB from the daughter board at the bottom there, we can proceed to take the rest of the keyboard apart. But before we do that, I want to see if it's possible to put in something like a switch pad to make the bottom outs less harsh, but it looks like there's not enough space. So what we're going to do with this instead is we are going to do a force break mod, which means putting something soft and squishy between all of the aluminium contact points. So where aluminium meets aluminium, that means on the ends of the rails, which I'm doing right now, and between the daughter board USB-C holder thingy and the bottom plate. So we're going to take care of these aluminium rails first, and then what we're also going to do after that is do a PCB tape mod. The PCB tape mod is supposed to not do much when it comes to Hall effect keyboards, but I was really curious to see, so we're going to test it. Right, so after we've applied tape to all of the ends of the rails, we can move on to the little CNC'd aluminium bit that holds the daughter board and the USB-C port, and the plate that holds that onto the whole keyboard. What we're doing here is we're just applying tape to all of the edges where it attaches to the other aluminium bits in the keyboard. This is quite a tight fit, but it fits quite well after you've squished it into place and made sure that it's not causing any severe interference. Just got to make sure that there's no doubling up of the tape, otherwise it does actually cause issues. It doesn't go back together properly. As you can see here, it fits together quite well after having made sure that there's no issues. As for the little section at the bottom that holds the PCB, we just got to make sure that none of the masking tape is sticking out the side, which means just either trimming it off with a knife or trimming it off with, in this case, a scalpel. I used the knurling of the scalpel to try and sort of sand off the edges to cut through the tape without making any hard marks on the aluminium, but that didn't always work, so we had to cut some sections very delicately. Once all that is done, we can put the thing together. It was quite a challenge to get the daughter board assembly back into the plate for the bottom because of the masking tape. It was just adding a bit of extra thickness. I ended up having to poke holes through the masking tape to get it back together. Okay, after we have that put together, we'll move on to the tape mod, which just involves putting a layer of painter's tape or masking tape on the bottom of the PCB. In this case, we put 2 layers down, just making sure to leave a space for the cable to plug back into the PCB, just to make sure we can actually connect the keyboard again without any issues. Yeah, with all of the force break and the tape mods done, we're going to move on to the stabilizers. Now the stabilizers on the EZ63 aren't terrible, but they are quite rattly. It became especially noticeable after about a week of use. The spacebar stabilizer is the most offensive. So we're just going to use our keycap and switch puller to remove those. Remove the switch in the middle to get the wire out, and then we can have a look and see that there's a fair amount of grease on the stabilizer. So they have lubed it up already, but it's not enough to reduce the rattle. What we're going to do today, at least, we're not going to re-lube the stabilizers. We're just going to do a quick and dirty test to see if wrapping the stabilizer wire in some band-aids, it's sort of a twist on the band-aid mod. We're going to wrap the stabilizer wire in some band-aid and see if that makes any difference. We're also going to put some band-aid, or in South Africa we'll call it. We're also going to put some of this elastoplast between the switch plate and the stabilizer, because I did notice that there was some rattling between the plate and the stabilizer itself. which was a little bit annoying. You know, that plastic and metal clanging, essentially, is what it was. Make sure that everything fits. It's a nice snug fit now, which is exactly what we want. Before it was a little bit rattly, and the rattle was causing some stabilizer ticking. It wasn't the only source of ticking, but the rattling was certainly an issue I wanted to address. Now I did redo the one side because the stabilizer became quite sluggish after putting Band-Aid on it, but once we had that done we could put it all back together and see what the result was. I effectively repeated the same process with both the enter and the backspace stabilizers on the right side of the keyboard, but I did not address the left shift or caps lock stabilizers because I want to do sort of a side-by-side test of before and after that doesn't involve comparing sound recordings, which aren't always the best. So with the stabilizers done and with all the force break and tape mods done, we can put the EZ63 back together. Like I said before, it's pretty easy. You just put the feet back on, you screw the rails in, and boom, it's all back together. At least it would be an easy keyboard to put back together, but I put a bunch of tape in the way, so now it's a bit of a tight fit, but it did eventually all go back together. Once we've got it back together, we are going to test the sound. First you'll hear before, and then you'll hear after with all the modifications done. I think it turned out quite well, with the sound profile now being a little bit less harsh. The stabilizer mod didn't remove all of the ticking, but it did do quite a good job of removing the worst, most egregious ticking that I was hearing. As far as the sound profile after the mods, I think it's a lot more poppy, whereas before it sounded a bit more like a typical gaming keyboard than I would usually like, but again, not bad before, I think better after. You can decide for yourself though and let me know if I've ruined a $200 keyboard.